happens all the time. One property made me more wealth in a year than all the money that I made my full-time job after I was taxed. And this like paradigm shift starts to happen where you realize gaining assets is how you grow wealth. And I've been banging this drum for a long time. I think people are finally starting to listen to me, which is nice. But there is a massive problem with inflation going on in our country. We are devaluing our currency. And in that environment, you can feel like you are getting wealthy because you're saving money, but you're really not. Your money is losing massive amounts of value every year. It sits there. So you almost have to be investing just to break even. Just to stay where you want to be, you have to be taking action. And I really believe more and more people are going to start to figure this out. And you Biggerpockets fans, you heard it first, right? So you had an advantage, but you're going to see that we're not likely heading to a crash in the real estate market. It's just going to get hotter as wealthier people start putting their money there to protect it from inflation. And when that happens, there's always vultures that will circle because it's easier to go and take your money than it is to make their own. And I think what Brian's talking about, which is beautiful, is this is how you make it harder to take your money. Right? When you were talking about how we set up these foreign trusts and different ways to make it difficult, it made me think about, I believe it was World War One. Actually, I should know this. I'm sorry that I don't. But when the Russians pulled the Germans into invading Russia and they just kept sucking them deeper and deeper and deeper into Russian territory and their supply lines got stretched out and then winter hit, it was very, very difficult to go after the Russians. So they finally gave up and said, I don't want it. Well, you could think about your wealth in that same way, that as people are coming after it, the more obstacles that you put in their way and the longer of a process you make them spend, the more money they have to spend on their lawyers to try to get to it, they're either not going to fight that war or they're going to quit once they start. And so this is a very practical thing to be learning, especially if someone really likes real estate, because it's going to become more and more important in the future.
These three different trusts. What going offshore, and particularly the Cook Islands, does is they have this beautiful thing that's called statutory non-recognition. All right, and what this means is that if you have a judgment against you in the United States, and you took it down to the Cook Islands, your U.S. judgment there is completely worthless. It literally has no value whatsoever because it has 7 very strong statutory standards. And so if somebody wants to sue your trust that you create in the Cook Islands, they'd have to start the case all over from scratch there. The person suing you would have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's the murder standard, the 99% sure standard, not the, U.S. civil case, 51% called a preponderance of the evidence. Like, maybe, I don't know, but sure, like, let's give them their money. You're talking about the highest legal standard in the world. You can't get a contingency fee attorney to represent you there because they're not allowed down there. It's unethical like it used to be here in the U.S., but that got changed in the 60s because lawyers now control our legal system and they want lawsuits to get started so they can get bigger paydays. The claim, meaning the lawsuit's not amendable. So once you file your complaint, that's it. Once you start sending out discovery and you start digging around and poking around, you can't just say like, oh, okay, well, we're going to now change what we're suing you about and sue you for this, even though we didn't know we were suing you for that. So we're going to amend our complaint. You can't do that down there. The person suing you is going to have to front the entire court cost plus flying a judge from New Zealand, and you can't take your U.S. attorneys with you down there. And the kicker here with this is like, if you lose, you pay. And so this is one of the single worst things that we don't have here in the United States, that the loser does not need to pay the legal fees of the winner. So if you get sued by somebody for something completely bogus, I mean like a frivolous lawsuit, and you spend $200,000 defending yourself on legal fees, and then the judge decides, hey, you know what, this is ridiculous, I'm throwing this case out, you're still out $200,000. They're not going to be getting the bill for it because that's discouraged in the U.S. because that would discourage people suing other people. And then there's only a 1-year statute of limitations. And so while you have now the most effective, remember the 4 things I told you to think about: effectiveness, cost, control, compliance. While you have the most effective trusts in the world by far, I mean, statutory non-recognition, right? It doesn't get stronger than that. Those other 3 factors, if you're going to go purely foreign, it falls short because now its costs are going to be very high, like $50,000 to $75,000 to set up a purely foreign trust. You're going to be out of control of your assets, and the IRS compliance is insane. You're talking about like full disclosures, FACTA disclosures, full trust disclosures. So for most people, that's a hard pill to swallow. So that's why we really rarely ever see, going purely foreign.
This really is a trial attorney because you're referring to case law. The second I hear that, I'm like, okay, that's actually a person who is going to end up being in court and knows this from a practical standpoint, not just a theoretical standpoint. I always noticed that when I worked in law enforcement, those of us that were in court testifying had to pay a lot more attention to the case law involved than those that never did any.